2, 1.
Welcome to Friday at 4, the weekly podcast of the Vermont Daily Chronicle. I'm your host, Guy Page, and I'm here with our reporter, Mike Bielawski, and our social media director, Paul Bean. Good afternoon, guys.
Good afternoon, Guy.
Yeah. So, Paul, why don't you tell us more about what to expect in the next hour?
Yeah, so first and foremost, just want to say if there are any technical difficulties, any tech issues, any weird noise, you can't hear us, we have an echo, anything, please feel free to write in the chat, and I'll let you know how you can do that. Is if you're watching on Facebook, you're watching on YouTube, X, wherever you're watching, there should be a chat button or a chat function below you, and just you can click right in there. Just like you'd comment on anything else, feel free to do so. We encourage it. We want you to. And I will show you as well, if you are watching on YouTube, please feel free to go to our page and click this button here. Click that subscribe button. Look at us, 613 subscribers. That's up in the past couple days, Guy, just so you know, just a little bit.
Wow.
But I know we have some things we want to talk about today. Do you want me to give a little bit of a run through, or do you want to maybe get us kicked off?
Well, I'll get right into the main topic. So after the killing of Border Patrol agent David Maland on Martin Luther King Day / Inauguration Day, it only took a few hours for the chatter to start on social media that there was a kind of a death cult, they were calling it, a death cult involved in this somehow. And we've been hearing from a lot of our readers saying, come on, tell us more about this. And frankly, we've refrained because we haven't had all the data, and with, the week that it's been at the State House, all the bandwidth to actually put it all together, to put together a comprehensive, credible narrative.
Might I add, too, Guy, just quickly, we did receive pushback for our initial reporting on the story. Mm-hmm. So I think just out of pure respect to our readers and our followers, we wanted to maybe not stay away from this story necessarily, but we're the Vermont Daily Chronicle. There's other things happening in Vermont that need to be focused on, and then we started to receive pushback for not covering it. So right. That's kind of how things go here sometimes. I maybe you could speak more of that, but I think we had to kind of respect the situation a little bit.
Yeah, there's some of that. So today, this afternoon, right now, we will be presenting our best assessment of the connection between the cult that began in Berkeley, California, and the slaying of Border Patrol officer David Maland on January 20th. And what were those two young people doing in Vermont anyway? What were they doing here? So, but before we really dive into that, here are some of the week's other big stories that you can check out on Vermont Daily Chronicle. The first one is that at Governor Scott's press conference yesterday, the administration announced that trees reduce carbon emissions, and their carbon reduction value will somehow be incorporated into the state's official emissions reduction plan. So as the governor's sort of proposed alternative to the clean heat standard, he wants to recognize the fact that we've got a gazillion trees in Vermont and they all consume carbon, and one way or another, that needs to be factored in. So we will be following that story, you can believe. Mike, also former Governor Douglas was in the House, in the State House yesterday. What was he doing here?
He was talking about health insurance premiums. Him and I guess you would call it a coalition of, you could call it bipartisan. There was Senator Chris Pearson. There was I couldn't tell you the straight numbers, but there was some bipartisan composition there. But what they're basically saying, we spend too much on administrative costs when it comes to health insurance. One stat that stood out was Green Mountain Care. If you go to, what do you call it, the UVM Medical Center, the big one in Vermont for healthcare providers, you are paying, it was like 71, I believe this is the right number, 71 cents on the dollar just for administrative costs, not including what the services that you actually get. Can you imagine going to a business and getting a quote for something and they say 2/3 of that does not include labor or time or any of those things? Wow. That's pretty much what we're dealing with. So, and I think it's good that they're pointing that out. They really want folks to buy health insurance, and they seem to think they can make it affordable in Vermont.
Okay.
It'll be interesting to see what they come up with.
Thank you, Mike. Also, there was a story you wrote about this morning on Vermont's student reading and math scores. What's up with that?
Well, they're going down, and so is the nation. Well, I know it's kind of not the most optimistic.
The test scores, you mean?
Test scores,
okay.
right? The test scores. Sorry. Sorry, the test scores nationwide and in Vermont are going down. That's what that should have been said. Okay. So we're all going down. We all sink together.
All right.
But no, it wasn't all bad. I will say, as a reporter, and this has been going on for years, ever since they changed the way to judge whether children are doing well in school, it's either you're proficient or you're not proficient. And that's it. There's one point, and you're either to the left of it, you're either on the good side of it or the bad of it. And for me as a reporter, I'm thinking, well, that's not very informative. When we were children, you got an A+, you got an A, or you got a B+ or a B. You actually were graded on your work. So with that, and the reason I'm bringing that up is it's hard for me as a reporter to really say what it means if most of our students aren't proficient. Does that mean they're not proficient like they're not with the national average? Does that just mean they're not 80%? What does proficient even mean? So I'll probably have a follow-up on that next week.
Well, good. We're looking forward to that. Paul, I gather some of the state officials were talking about the Trump plans for Vermont. What was up with that yesterday?
Yeah, so I didn't get to watch the whole press conference. I did stick around for a little while, and one of the big concerns that Becca Ballant was there yesterday. I believe Mike Pichek hosted a separate press conference earlier in the day. I saw former Lieutenant Governor Molly Gray. She was there. The whole cast of characters. And their big concerns were some of the executive orders coming out of the president's office. The biggest one being the anti-DEI, so diversity, equity, and inclusion programs throughout the country. And of course, that would naturally affect Vermont. I mean, I've heard statistics, as much as 1/3 of the state's budget is federal dollars. I don't know if you've heard.
I don't think it's quite that high, but
it's one of the highest percentages in the nation. I know that.
We do, but it's more like 10 or 15. But it's a big piece. Yeah.
Well, I guess maybe you could, somebody's saying you can't hear me. My microphone. Sorry, folks, if you didn't hear me, but basically, it's probably not 1/3. But so one of the big things was they were concerned about the Vermont Works for Women program, which is a nonprofit that is federally funded, $400,000 from the federal government over the last 2 years or more, about 4 years actually, so $200,000 a year. Program looks like it's going to get cut, and that's one of the programs. So there's stuff like that that they're kind of concerned with. I've heard other things. There's a lot of people that are concerned about some of the like the Rainbow Bridge. There's certain groups, the LGBTQ organizations that are concerned about losing funding here, which isn't shocking because
I didn't know that they even had federal funding, but I guess they do.
That was my thing.
Okay.
Well,
all right.
They do.
And also, there's something to do with Bernie and RFK having a run-in yesterday or the day before. What's up with that?
Yeah. So the last 2 days, not yesterday, but the day before that, and I guess Tuesday. The RFK has been having his confirmation hearings in the U.S. Senate. And I've been following it. And, Bernie over the years has been kind of like the anti-establishment, anti-big pharma candidate, whether it's been for president or serving in the U.S. Senate. And Bernie, really spent a good chunk of his time berating RFK Jr., in my opinion, about kind of really non-important stuff like, onesies, for example, that somehow or another are connected to RFK Jr. But one of the big things that RFK and Bernie had a heated exchange about, and this is all on the Vermont Daily Chronicle, so if you want to go check out the story, you want to see the clips, you can see it on our YouTube page. They're all there. Basically, RFK calls out Bernie Sanders and says, over the last 4 years, you have received more money from the pharmaceutical industry than anybody else, any other person. And then to Bernie's defense, as some people have explained, and I think it's worth noting that the money he's received, that it's about $1.5 million since 2020, all of that money comes from individual contributions around the country from people that work in healthcare. So that was his rebuttal. But the point is, Bernie, you're still there protecting the assets of the pharmaceutical industry. It doesn't matter if it's coming from individuals or if it's coming from CEOs. It's all in the same.
Okay.
But that was their back and forth. Check it out if you get a chance.
I actually heard Bernie spluttering.
Oh, yeah.
You don't hear that very often, but he
was pretty upset.
So, our top story, you really have to go back to the California frontier of the 1860s. And Vermont-born lawyer Frederick Billings, if you went to UVM and there was Billings Student Center,
of course.
He's the guy who donated the money for all that.
Billings Library.
So he wanted also to start the University of California out near San Francisco. And he and his pals are standing on a rock out looking over the bay, looking over the plot of land that the University of California would be based on. And one of them says, "What should we call this?" And Billings had just been thinking about a poem by a fellow named George Berkeley, which basically said, go west, the empire's to the west, find your future in the west. So he said, well, let's call it Berkeley. So the University of California was begun right then, and since has become a mecca for sort of free-thinking, radical ideas and teaching, and one of them is called the rationalist movement, begun by an AI researcher about 20 years ago named Eliezer Yudkowsky. And the reason this is important is he thought of something called timeless decision theory. And that is this sort of computery algorithm decision-making framework that people are supposed to try to adopt, a whole new way of thinking that sort of works in AI and computer thinking. I could try to explain it, but then I'd have to super well understand it, and frankly, it's a little beyond me. So there's this movement, rationalism, the rationalist movement. And they're not particularly, they're into free love, they're into transhumanism, they're into all sorts of sort of very left, progressive sorts of things, but they're not violent. And along comes this splinter organization. And in 2019, they show their hand, where they show up at a rationalist retreat, and they've got tear gas on them, they're wearing tactical gear, they're wearing the V for Vendetta masks, and are basically being kind of aggressive and threatening. They're screaming at the cops. And the leader is a guy named Jack Amadeus DeSoto, AKA Zis. In 2019, he's arrested, but they're all released. A couple years later, a bunch of these folks are living on some land in California, and for a couple years they had a free ride on the rent because of COVID, right? No one paid their rent during COVID. But 2022 rolls around, the landlord, 82-year-old man, says, "Time for you guys to start paying your rent again." And they didn't like that very much, and they tried to kill him. Attempted murder. He survives, 81, 82 years old. And one of the fellows who's implicated in that is this Andrew Leatham, who was at that original 2019 protest with Jack DeSoto. So we have this small cult continuing. And where it starts to get really interesting, Vermont interesting, you might say, is in 2022, or maybe the year after, someone finishes the job. Someone murders the landlord. And the person charged with that is a guy named Maximilian Snyder, who is a computer genius who got a 1570 on his SATs and all sorts of computer awards. And he's just a ridiculous genius at computers. And he's the guy who is now charged with killing this Lynn guy. And oh yeah, when the 3 people who were being followed by the feds in Vermont 2 weeks ago, one of them was Maximilian Snyder. They had the word out that, hey, if Maximilian Snyder or Felix Baucholt or Teresa Youngblood show up, we want to know about it. They had already, even before the killing, they were being watched or trying to be watched by the feds.
I just have a quick thing to add. This is Maximilian Bentley Schneider here. This photo is from New York Post, of course, and we do have it pulled up on our own graphic here, which also, this is, I mean, it's not our own graphic. This is a New York Post graphic as well, where down there in the bottom left middle-ish area is also a photo of Schneider. Just so you have context, it says, we actually have a comment. Taryn writes, Andy and No made that graphic. Thank you, Guy.
Yep.
I totally would have messed that up. And we also do have another comment from Taryn who writes, Ziz is a she/her.
I was about to say that.
Okay. Oh, I wanted, okay. I didn't
Yeah.
mean to jump to the gun there.
Yeah, no, that is a fact that Ziz, who's the former Jack Amadeus de Soto, goes by this name, identifies now as a woman, as a she.
So
Okay, and so also apparently does at least one other member of this cult. So I don't choose to make a big deal about that because I don't know really how that factors in, or even if it does factor in to the violent aspect of this. I do know that these folks are big into transhumanism, and maybe like uploading their minds into the and melding with computers and that kind of thing, and AI. So in the sense of wanting to kind of depart from their identity, they have that in common with transgender. Maybe there's a connection there. If some of our folks have some comments on that, we'd love to hear it. So I saw that, and I said, I'm just not sure how big a part of the story that is. Paul, go ahead.
I would just add, and that's once again, like, it kind of comes back to what I've been saying about the initial reporting in the first place. We start out reporting the story, saying it's an illegal immigrant, and everybody immediately assumes, that it's a certain type of legal immigrant, right? And then we find out, okay, no, maybe it's not, and it's actually a person from Germany, and then the story just becomes like totally even crazier, and it's almost like now we're talking about a transgender person who's maybe a transhumanist, and so like we're watching this, and everybody's kind of like almost upset with how we've reported on it, but it's like all this story has done is gotten stranger and stranger as time has gone on. Can you really blame us for not?
It's really not as simple as a Mexican legal immigrant who happens to be transgender.
No, it's really not.
It ain't that, folks. It's weirder than that.
It's very strange.
Yeah.
I've never read a story about it. I've never read a story quite as strange as this whole situation.
And so before we get into it more, we will take a moment for one of our sponsors. And Procter Gas, the propane people, owned and operated by our good friend and VDC supporter, Judy Taranovich. The team at Procter Gas has more than 100 years of combined experience in the propane industry and is dedicated to bringing the best possible service, products, and customer care to residents throughout Vermont. And I think, Paul and Mike, I can fairly safely say that Judy is probably pretty happy with the idea that the clean heat standard, as we understand it now, which basically takes money from the fuel dealers and gives it to the renewable power people, if that doesn't go through as passed, and if there's a major change that's maybe like tree friendly or something, she would probably think that's a good idea. I don't know. But welcome feedback on that as well. But Paul, do we have any more comments?
Yes, we do. Let's see here.
Wait, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Let me just quickly we want to honor our participants, and we really do. Please, we'd love it when you guys write in. It helps us piece stuff together.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to get to everybody, but let me just get started here. Taryn writes, the murder in Vallejo was on. Sorry, I don't speak Spanish. Was on the 17th. So Max went back to California after the 14th. I guess I do not know the answer to that question, Guy. Do you know the answer?
So is she saying that and maybe she's right, because the details of this get, that murder might have been very, very recent, the murder of the California landlord?
Yeah.
I was thinking it was, okay, fine.
Actually, I think it is very recent. Maximilian Bentley Schneider in Solero County Criminal Court for his arraignment on January 28, 2025.
Okay.
That's the New York Post.
Well, I knew about the arraignment. I didn't know if the murder itself was, but okay.
Okay.
That could be.
And we do have a handful more comments.
Sure, bring them on.
Youngblood IDs identifies as non-binary and uses neopronouns.
Yep.
Neopronouns. So, I mean, pretty much everybody involved in the situation uses some kind of. But this is what I think we're trying to get at is, the idea of like transgenderism as a construct. I think we're talking about these people. It's not just they don't really believe in gender; they believe in a whole different kind of consciousness. That's I think more the thing that we're trying to get at than anything. Would you?
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
There's a whole different sort of way of looking at the world in the universe and making decisions, and that the release from gender sort of plays into, maybe complements.
Yeah,
but it's not the driving thing.
It might be part of it, exactly, but it's not like the main force of their ideology. That's at least, I mean, it's definitely part of it. But Wizard writes, seems like a transgender tech hacker terrorist. So, again, this is also, Ann Fisher writes, Felix went by Ophelia, another transgender. The cult is a transgender cult.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure we definitely want your feedback on this, but I think we're trying to maintain that same point. It's like, I said this a long time ago when I was running for state senate. People would come up to me upset about transgenderism specifically. And I would say, well, from my perspective, where we're going with technology, I don't know if transgenderism is our biggest concern. I think it's a facet of a much larger ideology of transhumanism, ultimately.
Interesting.
So
yeah, it's interesting too that. Okay, yeah.
We're trying to stay on path.
We are. Good point, though, Paul. So the feds had linked Snyder and Youngblood, who's the Vermont shooter, together. They were planning to get married at one point. And the FBI has said there's also a connection with him and the slaying deaths of an elderly Pennsylvania couple, the Zajkos, in Chester, Pennsylvania. Now, what's also extremely interesting is that the daughter of the Zajkos bought the firearms that were used to kill David Maland, federal authorities say. They are looking for her. Apparently, people who knew her in the back, in the group, were saying that she hated her parents, that there was some abuse or what she considered to be abuse. And she's on the run right now. And they're looking for her in a green Subaru Outback. I don't know if in Vermont there are any green Subaru Outbacks, are there? Yeah.
I don't know, guys.
Yeah. So anyway, they're looking for her there. She also is another young genius. At age 19, co-authored a major paper on consciousness and sleep deprivation for NASA. And through the Philadelphia Children's Hospital. That's sort of kind of like a junior member of the team, but she's cited as an author of that. So, and mentioning sleep deprivation, this cult also sleep deprivation is a part of their thing. So we've got someone who's studied this stuff, who is kind of associated with it. In addition, the fellow who was the other shooter in David Maland also had studied game theory, had studied this sort of using computers to predict behavior. That was his one big published paper when he was, again, 19 years old. So it seems like they've made academic careers out of what they're doing right now, out of the content of the cult. So all four suspects here were computer whizzes, some more than others, and they're all implicated directly or indirectly in various murders in California, Pennsylvania, and Vermont. And when we return from a word from our next sponsor, we will be talking about why this group seemed so willing to kill. So we have a new sponsor, and it's Perro's Gun Shop, Route 2 in Waterbury. Yes. Ernie and Henry Perro opened Perro's Gun Shop in 1983. They had 6 firearms on a card table. And they've obviously expanded, quite a bit since then. Henry was a cop for various law enforcement agencies, and now he's retired from that. And together, they're running the operation. They have a 10,800 square foot retail location. They have a new 10-lane, 25-yard indoor shooting range, and which is the first such facility in Vermont open to the general public. And at Perro's, I was in there just recently looking for some ammo. You can find everything you're looking for, from self-defense, sporting guns, ammunition, and shooting supplies and accessories. Well, Paul, any more comments?
Yes, we do. We do have a handful more comments. And I think these are. They're not going to. Well, hold on. Let me just pull them up here. Let's see. These are factions of PETA and Rainbow that hover below the radar of the official organization. Dave Sula writes, postmodern transhumanism. I think that is the ideology that we're kind of grasping for here. And Taryn writes, transgenderism is connected to transhumanism. Check out famous Vermont transhumanist Maritime Rothblatt.
That's right. That's the founder of Sirius Radio.
Also went to the University of California, Berkeley.
Oh.
That's what I'm reading here. And they're actually, this person is one of the real founders of the transgender ideology. And here's a book, 2011, From Transgender to Transhuman, a manifesto on the freedom of form and artificial intelligence and virtually human. So this is the same person that founded Beta Technologies, am I not mistaken?
She was a major early investor in Beta Technologies in South Burlington. Not the founder of.
Well,
but yeah.
I think I know.
Vermont resident, at least for a while.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's quite a find.
Wow. Huh. So there's a connection, huh?
Yeah, David Kurtz.
We don't know if she was specifically connected to this.
Well, obviously we don't know that.
Yeah.
But there's definitely questions to be asked here.
Yeah.
And I think, I went on, Guy, and I want to I don't want to go up. I know we have a lot more to cover, but I researched Ziz, the original god Ziz, because this is a god. This is
no kidding.
This is a Mesopotamic god. And I have it here on the screen. Let me just read it to you, because it's kind of freaked me out when I read it a little bit. Ziz is a sky and lightning god in the Mesopotamian region, according to the most prominent role. Just going on down here. The Mesopotamic sky god was also worshipped as Ziz Mezanis, right? Ziz Batas has been interpreted as Ziz the Thunderer, a Mesopotamia lightning god and weather god, regarded as the ruler of atmospheric events, including storms, and therefore protector of navigation, satellite radio, just whatever. I'll stop. But
don't get started on geoengineering.
Don't get started on geoengineering.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. I didn't know that.
Pretty weird when you really
Okay.
start to tear into it.
Okay. So one of the aspects of this Ziz cult, says a blogger who's studied them quite a bit, is that Zizians do not think it is ever valid to surrender. The reasoning goes that if someone is trying to extract a surrender from you, giving in is choosing a strategy that gets coerced into surrender. If you fight bitterly, you prevent the coercion in the first place by making it too costly to fight you. So, no retreat, no surrender, ever. A lengthy review of email threads with Lesotho shows that he seemed perfectly willing to kill. He never actually admitted, I killed someone, but he went all around that subject. And he even endorsed a terrorist mass extinction plan of the German nation, which was thankfully stopped in time, but there was a terrorist who wanted to use gas to wipe out all of Germany because of the Holocaust. And he said, sounds like a great idea. So, yeah. So from the top down, you have an organization that basically says, no retreat, no surrender, and you mess with us and we'll kill you. Okay? Now, a question that a family member asked me right before the show is, what were those people doing here? Why were they in Vermont? And I have a theory, actually a theory expressed by a rather senior law enforcement official in Vermont, that we will mention after we talk about Ranmark Corp of Berlin. Their residential building division, Village Homes, specializes in affordable, energy-efficient modular and manufactured home projects. Their family team and skilled craftsmen have decades of experience to complete your project with ease, on time, and on budget. Paul, any more sort of thoughts and weigh-ins?
Yeah, and I just want to be clear. I think I said that the Maritime Rothblatt went to University of California, Berkeley, but I'm seeing it's University of California, LA. I just want to make that point, just to be for clarity. I don't want to be unfair. Taryn writes, transhumanism believes that people can become immortal gods through technology. And somebody also writes, Dave, I think maybe said this already, but just want to make sure we read it off. A green Subaru would be trying to find a needle in a haystack here in the Green Mountain State. Yes, it would be.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to escape an anonymous car, green Subaru, baby. Yeah. So why were they here in Vermont?
Well, I have an idea.
Okay, go ahead. Go for it, Mike.
So it's not a related story, but I think it can relate to the specific question. When I was working for the Hardwick Gazette, maybe this must have been like 10 years ago now, I was at the bar I was at the Positive Pie on the main street there, and a lady came up to me and sat down next to me, and she knew I was a reporter, and she started telling me about alleged sex trafficking in Vermont. And I listened, and it sounded a little sensational, but I've heard these kind of stories from around the nation. But she said to me something that I think brought this discussion to mind. She said, Vermont's so rural, if you have a nefarious or illicit activity of any kind, be it what these folks might have been up to or something else, Vermont is actually a very ideal setting for those kind of things. Plus, it's a border state. So, yeah, and it's on the main avenue down in New York if you got the highways that go down there. So there's a lot of reasons why we're actually perfectly in the middle. We've got Montreal and Boston and everything. So I feel like it is actually an ideal place for bad behavior of certain kinds.
And if you did want to be isolated, the kingdom would be the place to be.
Yeah, the kingdom especially.
Yeah. Well, that plays in pretty well. A 100% reliable source told me this week that they had been told by a close friend who was out in the woods in Wheelock. And if you remember the coverage of this story, these two people, Youngblood and Baucolt, Before they were in Newport, they were in Lyndonville. They were staying at a hotel in Lyndonville for several days. The next town over from Lyndonville is Wheelock. And this guy was out in the woods. He was a hunter. I don't know if he was out actually hunting something legal this time of year or maybe looking for places to hunt going forward. But he was just out in the wilderness of Wheelock, and he sees these two young people wearing tactical gear, not at all dressed for the season, armed, out in the woods. And they just sort of stumble across each other. And they look very befuddled and a little bit surprised at having run into this guy. And he says, "Hey, can I help you? Like, are you lost? What's going on?" And he said the guy basically just, his eyes popped open, he did a 180, and he ran back up the hill as fast as he could. Just ran away. And that, when he saw the pictures later, that was Bauchold. That was Felix Bauchold. And he said that the woman came up to him and was clearly not someone who was not like under anyone's thrall. She was with it. She was sort of an active participant in whatever it was that they were doing. And he said, and that was Teresa Youngblood, based on the pictures that he saw later. So here they were, scouting out in the woods of Wheelock, looking for doing something. And it's a... So the question is, what? What were they doing? And I talked to a senior law enforcement official, and he said he doesn't know. This isn't based on knowledge that he has. But his theory is, okay, things were going bad in California, right? Things were heating up in California with the trial and everything. And what state is kind of like California, except for they actually have much more gun-friendly laws, right? And you can get out and be in the middle of nowhere. What state would you, and is also fairly, if the trans is a thing, and some of them were trans, is also a trans-friendly state. Well, what state would you want to be in? So maybe they were looking to kind of relocate, kind of start fresh back east in the home of Frederick Billings. It's a thought. It's not a crazy idea. And I think, Tim, off camera, you were going to say something.
No, just you're running from federal authorities. Well, they're looking for you making a beeline to either border, because that's an easy way to get out of their jurisdiction. Although Canada, to anybody who knows that Canada is one of the worst places you could do. You can do that because of the extradition treaties and cooperation between law enforcement. But for someone who hasn't really had to deal with that, it doesn't seem like they've really thought the criminal aspects through at all. I think that might be part of it, but you're also getting almost as far away as you can get to kind of the liberal bastion, as far away in the mainland U.S. as you can get. And it's right next to one of the most porous sections of the border.
Yeah. Okay. So what, folks,
you slip out with all the other people.
If you didn't hear, what Tim was saying is, if you're being chased by the United States federal authorities, getting across the Canadian border might seem like a really good idea. And so there you are, up on a very porous section of the border. So maybe that's like part of the backup plan is we're going to be here. So just in case we need to light out and get across into Canada, or maybe hopefully it's safer, that's why we're there. So that's a thought, Tim. So the idea is, what better place for people in their situation and their mindset to make a new start than in Vermont? Maybe we'll know at some point. I don't know. Mike?
I would offer to maybe sort of build on that theory. I feel like in other press releases on border crossing stories for the northern border, not always, but sometimes I think they involve a group trying to rendezvous with another group that's already over here. Because you can't really just drive a car over the border. It's easier if you can get through one of the spots in the woods and then find somebody with a car who knows you're going to be at some place at some time, and then probably coming through the woods, which they were traveling through the woods, to avoid whoever you're trying to avoid. So I feel like there could have been something like that, maybe another party at play that was trying to meet them somewhere. I'm just thinking of how some of these...
Well, we know about this Michelle Zajko, who owned land in Derby.
Okay, so that could have been...
And who provided them, who bought the guns and likely provided them the guns with which they shot the Border Patrol guys. So clearly there was a Vermont place there.
So yeah. I mean, this is just speculation, but I'm thinking of how other crimes have gone on the border.
Right.
I feel like there's been at least some scenarios, and it makes sense. If you're coming across a cold, rural, icy border, you want to meet somebody in a car probably as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So.
Can I add to the story? And maybe you are going to go here.
I'm pretty much done with my stuff.
I just want to add to the story. Come to find out, Christine Olm is in Vermont.
Oh yeah.
That's like kind of the craziest part of the whole thing. I mean, maybe not. But
now, who's Christine Olm, for those
Christine Olm, for who doesn't know, is recently appointed to Secretary of Homeland Security.
Right.
So that's one of that position oversees, I believe, Border Patrol, ICE.
Yeah.
Right? And there are other various groups I don't want to name anymore, I'd be wrong, but I know those two. So that's kind of a big deal. I mean, she was just appointed by the newly elected president, newly sworn in president. Obviously, this story did pick up national attention. I mean, we knew this anyway, but take us back to that day last week when we kind of maybe had some of the details a little bit wrong about the initial reporting on it. But the governor's office saying, we've gotten some phone calls from around the country from angry conservatives. I wonder if I don't know if that had anything to do with it.
Sure, you never know. I mean, and Christine Olm, the reason we know about that is News 5.
Yeah.
They broke that story.
Good on them.
Yeah, that she flew into the Newport, it's the Northeast Kingdom International Airport, it's called. Basically a small regional airport in Newport. And she flew in there around 2 o'clock. She met mostly with Border Patrol people.
Yeah.
And was gone by about 5 o'clock yesterday.
Okay, so it was brief.
Yeah, but still, she came up here. And
I think it still adds to the story. Like, it's. I guess what I'm trying to say is we talked a little bit before we talked about this whole story about some of the executive orders that are coming out and the reaction from the states. I think we're really going to learn in this Trump administration where the rubber meets the road on states' rights and federal government and the United States Constitution, and where these borders, they might seem like ambiguous lines to you, but within the law, the framework, the founding framework of our country, these laws exist for a reason, and I think we're going to find out more and more. They haven't really been challenged in recent times. They keep joking about Canada, or maybe they're not joking, Canada becoming the 51st state. It's like there's more to this all, I think, than we realize. And some of the way that things have been, the ideas that the borders that have existed since post-World War II, things might change. That's things that we haven't seen in my lifetime, obviously, and maybe not even yours, Guy. I don't know.
Right. Well, who knows? Greenland could be the 51st state.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Greenland and Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
No, probably not. Probably not. Yeah. Okay. Well, folks, that's the information that we have and some of the theories that we put out there. Do you have, Paul, there are other folks who are saying things here?
Well, I just want to thank everybody for the comments first and foremost today. Thank you for participating in conversations that people that have, because you were able to help me solve a tech problem with Mike's microphone, which I thought I had sorted out. Turns out there were some other issues with it, but I figured it out thanks to you all. So thank you so much for your help. And there's a couple more comments basically just saying, Tactical gear is the Antifa uniform. That comes from Terran. Wizard writes sus, which means, suspect. If you
Yeah.
like, that's like the kind of cool way to say it, I guess. I don't know. But that's pretty much it from comments. Glenn Burmert writes, interesting. Why was she here? Well, that's not suspicious. I think that must have been in reference to Kristi Noem. I think that they're paying pretty close attention to that situation, or at least the situation as a whole. Because as I think if we've started to peel back, right, this is a much bigger situation than, I don't mean to belittle the situation, right? But it's not just a Border Patrol agent who was murdered. There's a lot more to this story, and it goes a lot deeper, I think, than any of us, honestly, any of us want to go.
So along that line, Paul, one of the things that the senior law enforcement person said was, the feds, Homeland Security, they were watching these people for days ahead of time. A big federal operation. And they don't do this if they're, just doing penny-ante little stuff.
No, they do not.
They do it for big stuff. And you look at, okay, they're big into computers. They're big into, oh yes. How could I forget? Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX, the connection here. Sam Bankman-Fried gave $5 million, the same guy who gave $1 million to Becca Balint right before her winning her first race, or rather to an organization that then gave it to her campaign. Gave $5 million to the who is the name of the guy? The guy who founded this rationalist group.
Oh, not Ziz. Bielawski.
Right. To his organization gave $5 million to it because of its AI stuff although they wanted after Bankman was charged, the organization wanted it back. FTX wanted the money back. So there's this whole thing, the connection with AI, with crypto. This guy, Felix Balcolt, the German, was a quantitative trader. And so could there be a big financial crime here as well? We don't know, but I expect at some point that is going to come out. And finally, we do have a couple minutes left here, Paul and Mike. You reported on talk about cartels and weapons and dangerous people. There was a bust in Bethel.
It was 9 people, 5 from Vermont, 4 from Connecticut, including, I think, a father-son duo, because there's a senior and a junior who are about, one's half the other's age. But in any case, the headline, as you can see, they found a grenade launcher, among other weaponry.
Heavy armaments.
What is going on in the state here,
This
guys?
is Little Bethel, the one where when you're driving on, I forgot what the road is, but if you're heading to Rutland from like the highway, 89, it's that little town you pass through with the fish on the walls. That's how my kids know it. But anyway, that little town, this is like something out of like the TV show Fargo, or that Netflix show The Ozark, or something like that. We're getting to that level.
You made a point in your story, Mike, that the cartels, the Mexican cartels, which are absolutely moving the product through Hartford, Springfield, up to Vermont. So that they're being found with grenade launchers and with heavy armaments.
That was an international headline. I don't have the publication off the top of my head, but the essence of it was that the Mexican government was frustrated with the U.S. government or the U.S. in general over cartels ending up with military-grade weapons that they feel came from America. And I can't fill in the blanks on the rest of that. I do know there was maybe 8 or 10 years ago some kind of scandal involving perhaps the Obama administration and something like that. But I don't know if this was part of that or something different. But that was the headline.
I guess if
and
you
it's
want
in
to
my article.
intimidate one of your fellow drug people, a grenade launcher is not a bad way to do it. Tim, you're raising your hand. What's up?
Also wanted to note, too, the son of that father and son duo, I believe we may have covered a case involving him in Burlington
That's right.
as well, because
That's
he
right.
had been in a situation, he was claiming he didn't know anything about a gun being present. However, he was accused of holding a gun to somebody's face over what seemed to be, if I remember correctly, a drug payment something dispute.
Right.
And he was released back to his mother's care in Connecticut
Okay.
on federal probation, and yeah, that's one of the things they're charging him with is violation of that, and that was only what, October, September or October.
So he may have gone back to his mother, but his dad, he got back in the family business pretty quickly, apparently, according to the
It's
charges.
starting, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't be
Okay.
surprised if they kind of reopen something.
Yeah,
involving
me too,
him.
me too. Okay, well, Paul, any last comments before we wrap up?
Yes, a couple of them. We have Dave Sula, who writes, we have a concentrated growing consumer base for dealers in Vermont. Yeah, I hate to say it, but
Yeah.
it's becoming increasingly obvious that that's going on. He also writes, that's why we're seeing these escalations. And I think he's absolutely correct, because I view it as, since the inauguration, I mean, day one, it does seem like a lot has escalated here. You know, you're hearing about this drug bust, the Border Patrol agent situation. I heard there was ICE agents yesterday down in Hartford, Vermont. That was something that was said at the press conference yesterday with Becca Ballant and them.
Really?
Yeah, I've heard
Of course-
all
of
sorts
course.
of stuff.
Hartford, ICE does hang out at that I-89 intersection, and they do stops there. They do traffic stops there. That's a fairly regular thing. So that may have been what she was referring to. But that's Dave's point. By the way, for those of you who don't know, Dave Sulia publishes FYIVT.com, which is a terrific Vermont news and commentary website. If you like the Chronicle, you will love FYIVT Vermont. And he's not, even if he were a competitor, I wouldn't care, because you should read him. He's really good. So Dave makes a really good point that as business grows, so does the investment that the dealers make in wiping out the competition and getting more.
The bigger the risks they're willing to take.
Yes.
And I think it almost is like, it's like a big trap in some ways for them. Also have a comment from Taryn, who writes, $26,000 to Ballant, $1 million to the Equality PAC to defeat Molly Gray in primary.
That's what it was.
That's a very important note that should be made.
Yeah.
There's so many. There's this story, Guy. Man, the different offshoots of it.
Yeah.
It's like one of those stories that, you know, you come through. We've had a handful of them, right? You know, we had like the map story. There's been some things we've covered that are like, whoa. But this thing has just taken us down so many paths, and the impact of this new administration. And you know, this is my personal opinion. I do believe the inauguration had something to do with what was going on that day. That's my personal opinion.
Could be.
And to see this happen as quickly as it did here, and the stuff that we're starting to see too, really does have these people kind of frozen in their tracks. They're like, man, this is all happening so fast. Things are changing, and for better or worse, some people aren't really getting on with the program. I'm curious to see how that's all going to shake out. But that's my closing point. Just thought I'd make.
I have something I can add to the prior conversation about. So I did find the article off my article. It was the Associated Press reported that the headline is Mexico demands investigation into U.S. military-grade weapons being used by drug cartels. This article published right about a year ago, but it's very interesting because it's got quotes from the top officials from the Mexican government claiming that these are military weapons in U.S. or not in U.S. in Mexican drug cartel's hands. How does that happen? I won't go there, but
Right.
but you
Okay.
can all speculate in the comments.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. So, Paul, any last comments before we sign off?
Dave Sula, well, how nice. He says, there's no competing with VDC. Hey, we try, and we hope that everybody out there enjoys. And David Kurtsetter writes, like an octopus, tentacles and lots of areas. You know, that's a pretty good point.
right.
Stop right there.
Maybe some term limits would help with that. So anyway, folks, thank you for tuning in. Please share with your friends. Share on your social media. Let's get this word around. And Paul, I think we're all done. And folks, you can tune in next week to 4 o'clock. Actually, you know what? One last thing, Paul. You did a terrific video using, for the first time, a Zoom interview.
Yeah.
And so, folks, check out our YouTube page. He interviewed via Zoom a guy who wrote a children's book that is the antidote to the fear message given to children about climate change. So, you know, where else but on BDC and CreamyCast are you going to see an interview like that? So anyway, Paul, I guess we're all done. And folks, we'll see you next week at 4 o'clock.